Hello and welcome to this panel discussion today. Welcome, Samir and Indipal. It's so nice to have you. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into one of the world's largest democratic exercises, which is the Indian election. So, a few months ago, the Union Home Minister Amit Shah he had made a statement saying that incumbent Prime Minister Narendra Modi he's going to return for a third term, and this time with two-thirds majority. The BJP has set a target to win 370 Lok Sabha seats. And this statement raises an extremely pivotal question, which is number one, does the BJP have a strong case to achieve this? And number two, what would possibly be its implications on the democracy of India? Because technically speaking, a two-thirds majority would allow the BJP to virtually oppress any kind of opposition it faces and pass absolutely any law that it desires. So it's worth debating today through this discussion. Number one, can the BJP achieve this milestone that they've set for themselves? And two, what would be its possible implication or ramifications on the state of democracy of India and on the state of on the state of opposition? So, Indipal, can you start us off by walking us through what the political landscape looks like today? What's going on in the electoral landscape, and how do you view this right now?
Yeah, it's a complex picture. First of all, it's because we are the largest democracy in the world, and the combined, the voter mass of India is larger than US and Israel and a number of countries put together. So the sheer amount and the number of voters there is, and that is why the election is being conducted over a period of weeks, which is unusual in itself. So the scale at which this election is being fought is phenomenal. That is the first thing, uh, uh, which makes it a complex thing. And then the interplay of ideology and development and issues and controversies, and the competition, the fair and unfairness of politics, the involvement of many other players such as the ED and the judiciary. So that makes it a very complex picture. On one side, we have a party which is claiming to, win over 400 seats, which is, which is such a big proportion out of the 543 seats that are in the parliament. And then in the same, frame, you have a chief minister being arrested, a political party whose accounts have been frozen. And then on the same picture, we have multiple revelations such as the electoral bonds, and then protests, farmers protest in the backdrop, and the Ladakh protest in the backdrop. So it's a very complex picture, too many pixels to look at, too many issues to factor in. So it is a very complex picture. That is the first point which comes to my mind when I look at these elections. Yeah.
Samir, walk us through the political landscape today. Do you agree with Indipal? Do you see it a little differently? How do you think the BJP is doing according to you for the kind of statements that they are making?
I think like it was a great summary by Inderpal about how like complicated India is, like really just boxing it into one kind of political landscape. It's quite hard to do. But in terms of where they are at and what my thoughts are on this situation, like I don't think it's an unreasonable claim what Amit Shah made. Like recently, Oxford Policy Management, which is a pretty credible source, did a survey for approval ratings, and Modi's approval rating was around 78%, which is unprecedented. And like even with the India bloc like dwindling in power and opposition just losing credibility, it is quite obvious that which way this election is going. But that doesn't mean I necessarily agree with it. In fact, quite the opposite. I don't like the way things are heading, because regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum, one thing for sure is you just cannot have or be accepting of such a hegemony in politics for the simple reason that if there is no opposition party, then that's a bad sign. If there's not a strong opposition party, then the politics in the country aren't heading in a good direction, because purely if you want to run a democracy, there needs to be some form of dissent. And if an opposition party virtually doesn't exist, that dissent doesn't exist. And while you could laud them for the tactics they've used to get here and how they have like really smartly got in the demographic, it is still problematic for a multitude of reasons. And especially if you get into the specifics of what the implications of this actually are, if BJP like winning for a third term, and especially if you've seen what they've done across two terms, and if you are a critic like a lot of people are, and it doesn't like, for a democracy, which is what we are, it just isn't great science, is what I would say.
Right. That's a really interesting perspective. And I want to talk about an interesting point you raised, was that popularity poll that you spoke about. Prime Minister Modi is still extremely popular. And I think he's been one of the prime ministers who's not been afraid to take some really tough stances. What would you say, Simir, first you and then we'll move on to Inderpal. What would you say have been his top 5 achievements that, put him above everyone else and all the previous prime ministers that we've had? What are some really tough decisions he's taken?
Well, I mean, obviously, like I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not quite like the BJP supporter, or I'm not somebody who's going to cast my vote for BJP in the elections. But there is no denying that what they have done is quite different to all the election strategies that have been employed before. Their usage of social media has been unprecedented in like how they have used social media to gather votes and to gather support is something that we haven't seen before. It's clearly shown in the market that they've tapped into, and in the decisions that they've made, it is they're not trying to play it safe. They know what they want to do, and they are going ahead and doing it. And how they're controlling the media and everything. These are things that you have to give them. Like, you have to say that these are strategies that they have employed quite well. So that is something that you have to give to the party. Like, their PR team is quite incredible, but whether the implications of this are good or not is something, again, that is to be debated. And I'm sure we'll get into it as we move on later in the roundtable.
Right. Inderpal, I want to come to you. I want to ask you, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been, for example, let's just take action on terror, right? India's reaction to the Uri attack and their reaction to the Pulwama attack, that was the first time that we've really demonstrated a sort of muscular foreign policy. So would you say that is one of the reasons why people vouch for him? It's because they kind of know that he's not afraid to like do things that other world leaders would shy away from or make tough decisions. What is it that he's done that sets him apart?
Yeah, so his Modi's military and defense strategy is one of his selling points
Right.
that usually helps him, sway the public opinion. So, as you said, response to Pulwama and Uri. Although it's not as simple a picture as that can be summed up in these two reactions, because we have a lot of other, response to China that has, we have lost many soldiers. We have lost a lot of land to China. Chinese villages have been set up. So there are, merits and demerits on both sides. However, what the Modi government has done really nice is selling the Modi brand and picture on his response to defense. Of course, because BJP is a much more disciplined and well-aligned party. So leaders and ministers usually walk in line. So that helps him stay as a strong leader. That of course is there. And that of course helps us have a much more powerful defense strategy. So having said that, that is not a complete picture. It is more complicated than it seems
Right.
When you talk about, because we have had other perspectives to look at Pulwama also. But it is correct to say that we have responded with a strong foot, and that has been one of his selling points.
Right. What would you say are the BJP administration in the last 10 years? What have been their 3 major successes?
All right. It has been, since it's a decade, so a decade is a long time to do work, and we have seen multiple things unfolding every year. We had a very robust COVID strategy, although I mean some people do criticize things in that, but I mean vaccinating a 100 crore plus population is a task in itself, and then on top of that we exported vaccine to a number of countries, so maybe that counts as a success. Maybe the culmination of the Ram Mandir issue counts as a success. At least it sells as a success because it is putting a full stop to a long standing issue. It is controversial, but at least it puts a full stop, and as Supreme Court also said at that time that enough is enough and we need a decision. So maybe that counts as a success of BJP. Maybe GST was a success. uh,
I think we've lost him.
I mean, yeah, on
all right, he's back.
Yeah, so on especially on foreign policy matters. So our stand on Ukraine has been very independent, and now that I mean we look at it, we realize how good of a decision it was. So maybe that is one of BJP's successes.
Right. Samir, I want to ask you the same question. What are the three main successes, and do you think those successes are enough to tell the opposition to put their foot in their mouth?
I think Indrapal kind of hit kind of nailed it. It is a very interesting question as to what you quantify as a success. As in, like, there are multiple ways of, if you were a Muslim, would you look at Ram Mandir as a success? If our metric of measurement is, oh, this is what BJP was setting out to do to capture the Hindu majority starting out of 2014, I think it would count as a success. But if we're purely talking about what it would do for their party and not the ramifications of what actually come off Ram Mandir, so like he really has, like, 10 years is a long time, and like especially in terms of what they've done with caste politics and like just gathering support is something that's unprecedented. Like when you talk about India, caste is something that is so integral to India as a whole, and like it just when BJP has come in and completely managed to blur caste as an issue, and like this could be due to a multitude of reasons, not having caste census and a factor of reason, but like unifying the Hindu body and getting it as a collective, which is not something we've seen before because caste is such a contentious issue. It is something that whether you agree with it or not, that's again not a discussion that we're having really. It's about what this has done for their party, and it really has like galvanized their party and allowed them to get a lot of votes. So yeah. I guess that is adding on to what Indrapal said, has been a massive success for them. That's something their opposition could not contest with.
Right. So now that we've discussed successes, I want to come to what the government's failed in doing. What do you think have been the three major things that they failed in? And do you think that their failures outweigh their successes, or would their successes outweigh their failures? Simir, will start with you and then Indrapal.
So yeah, like not to sugarcoat it, I'm just gonna go out there and say it as if I was a voter going into the voting and if I had cast a vote, it would not be BJP because purely from my personal standpoint, I think their failures have quite heavily outweighed their successes.
Okay.
In terms of, I think the religious polarization is something that is not like everything that's happened is not something that sat well with me. Like especially while you could say that Ram Mandir is a success, and we have discussed why it is a success in terms of what they were going for and how they achieved it. If I was viewing it just as a citizen, it's not something I would have wanted, especially the way they went about it and how it's created such immense religious polarizations in that the reactions to any types of dissent that have come out, like there have been instances in IIT Bombay, instances in Telangana. There was the one instance with the church where the protesters had put up a flag of the RSS and whatnot. So all of these don't augur very well. And this is not an instance that happened in isolation. There was a lot of just polarization that happened during CA and RC. During COVID, there was the whole incident with Tablighi Jamaat and how they were charged for causing the first wave, even though it was something that the Supreme Court had later said that it's not actually on them. Neither was it on the protest, like the people who were at the gathering in Varanasi. It's again one of those issues where it wasn't supposed to be turned religious, but everything in India now inherently has a religious angle, which is not something that should be, which is, as a person in a democracy, it's not something that augurs well, right? And secondly, I would like to talk about, while the economic growth is something that we could say is a massive positive, has that economic growth actually reached the people that it is intended to reach, right? Has it reached the people on the ground? That's another big critique. While on paper it's really nice, it looks all shiny and great, has it actually reached the farmers who are still protesting for a multitude of demands? Has it reached the youth? Has it reached the women who are still facing a lot of unemployment? That's another thing that we would have to evaluate, because economic growth in isolation never just does the job. It has to achieve something. It has to, if you're making the rich richer, that's going to happen regardless. And the framework for that was laid out with LPG way back. It's about how you can push everyone up at once. So there are a multitude of failures that I think the government has to address if they are going forward in the next term.
All right. Indipal, you want to add in?
Yeah, so on a lot of issues, I mean, the backside, the flip side of the success is itself a failure. So I mean, while we may hail the response of the government during the COVID period, we can also, I mean, question the stance of, you know, shutting down an entire country of 140 crore people in one go without any information. Maybe that counts as a failure. Also, I mean, from an economic point of view, although we are doing good on GDP, especially when there is a global economic slowdown, but the gap between the rich and the poor, the dropping of the per capita income, that is very wide to be ignored. So I mean, we are performing very poorly on the hunger index. We are performing very poorly on democracy indicators, on press freedom index. So that is of course a failure of the government. And I mean, it's a different perspective, but I think the weakening of the opposition is also one of the failures of the government, because media and, you know,
That's
actions
interesting.
such as policies such as electoral bonds, and that weakens the opposition. And while 400 seats, 400 plus seats for a party looks very good, I mean, for one party, but also it presents a dismal picture of a country that has a very weak opposition, which you know, weakens the democracy in turn. So that also, I mean, and the polarization, as Samir mentioned, that is a very, I mean, very big shift in how elections are fought. The very shift in in you know, the agenda of elections, the issues on which, you know, a voter votes, that has changed. So we have come a long way from 2014, and these, I think, are some of the highlights, positive and negative.
Right. That's interesting. That's a nice summary that you've given, and I think that will also help us move on to the next topic that we're discussing, which is what are the main bones of contention in this election. So this election is charged along religious lines. There's a lot of religious polarization. There's the economy. Although we've now become the fifth largest economy in the world, we haven't hit the economic benchmarks that the BJP had promised. We've grown macroeconomically, but we haven't, it's not seeped into the microeconomics of it. So what would you qualify as the three main contentions in this election between the two parties? What is different about them? What are the three main issues? Indipal, you, and then Samir.
All right. So, I mean, we may like it or not, but religion, of course, is one issue on which any voter in India right now will vote. So, Ram Mandir will stay on the back of everyone's mind. I mean, no matter which side you are on. So, Ram Mandir is something that will decide who you are voting for. So, that I think is one issue. And then, secondly, the lack of a clear opposition leader and a clear opposition, you know, alliance or, you know, grouping, that also is going to impact this election. Because I mean, I've been talking to a lot of people on the ground, the you know, common men also, and it is a very recurring question: Modi nahi to kaun? Who if not Modi? So lack of that competition, the lack of that alternative is also going to impact. Because, you know, in political science we study something called the wasted votes theory. So no voter will like his votes to be wasted. So any voter will like to, you know, vote for a winning candidate. You know, no one likes to be a part of the losing team. So that is of course going to be one issue. And thirdly, we have a lot of, you know, face versus face battle going on this time. So I come from the Ludhiana constituency, and today only we had this update that Ravneet Singh Bittu, the grandson of the former, Chief Minister of Punjab, Beyant Singh, has jumped his boat. He has moved from Congress to BJP. He's a known face. He has won election before. He has been an MP. So it's going to be a lot of face versus face battle. We have people like Kangana Ranaut fighting this time, and people like Sunil Jakhar announcing that BJP is going to campaign alone in Punjab.
Naveen
So
Jindal himself, yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of this, personal, personality cult driven election also. So these are three issues that I can identify.
Right. Thank you for that. Sibir, what about you? What are the three main issues of this election?
I think adding on to what Indrapal said, like whether we like it or not, like when I'm going to go into vote and when others are going to go into vote, regardless of which side of the issue you fall on, religion is going to be a huge point of contention. And along that, I think he also mentioned like where we rank, and transparency is a huge one. In that, I think there is a freedom of speech is not doing the best it's ever done, and it's fair to say that, especially when like you have the current government, which is in ties with like Reliance and other major outlets, and when you have them pushing out all the information, I think Reliance reaches around 800 million people, if I'm not wrong. That was the statistic I had gotten. That's a lot. And when you have them actively pushing out all the information, it is hard to, like Indrapal said, that's one of the reasons you don't have a strong opposition. Like he said, it's a very interesting thing he mentioned. When you're talking about people on the ground, all of them have a very similar line of argument. Yeah, Modi is the lesser of the, if not Modi, who Rahul Gandhi has this or that kind of perception. But that is a perception that is given to you by them. It is a perception that they are feeding to you. And kudos to them. If that was their PR strategy, they have done a great job at it. But nonetheless, that is not something that is like being a journalist right now in India is not the best thing, right? We've slipped down the World Press Freedom Index. We're very low. We're around, I think, as of 2022, we were 150 out of 180. And like being a journalist in this country is just not it's not something anyone would want to be right now, especially with Gauri Lankesh's murder in 2017, journalists being arrested, any form of dissent being shut down immediately, like whether it's a screening, whether it's students protesting at universities like DU or JNU, it's all being shut down. So the lack of strong opposition is something that's a major issue. And if I was going to go into vote, it would be one of the reasons why you would one of the reasons either party would vote is transparency, because I think even people on the ground would want more information. They would just want more to be able to go and vote. So that's another major issue. And again, like you said, the economy is a huge one. Like if we're doing so well in these macroeconomic indicators, why is it that our savings index is absolutely stalled over the last few years? Why is it that the inflation rate is consistently above our targeted 4%? I think right now it's around 6.8 to 7%, one of the two numbers. And why is it that we are still lagging in so many, like if you're someone on the ground who's trying to purchase food, why is it even in spite of all this growth, you are struggling to purchase this food? And that is a reason, if you're a common man, if you're on the ground and you're trying to vote, that's something I would consider. What uses economic growth if that's not reaching the people on the ground?
Right. So now that we've established and we've kind of understood the war board of the BJP, what their successes have been, what their failures have been, I want to move on and talk about the opposition. Indrapal, can you walk us through the game plan of the opposition? What have they done? Can you talk about the India Alliance? What's its status? What its status is, and does it have a chance against the BJP?
It's important to note how India Alliance came into being and what the founding, sort of principles were. So, it's common knowledge that it came to, put an opposition, a strong combined, allied opposition to the ruling party. However, it has seen a very serious downfall because it is very difficult to, bring together parties which do not agree on basic, founding principles such as Aam Aadmi Party and Congress, and then we have, Trinamool Congress. So it's very difficult to bring such parties and strong leaders and leaders who have their egos involved. So Mamata Banerjee and Arvind Kejriwal and Bhagwant Mann are kind of leaders whose egos are usually involved for the right reasons, because that is what drives votes for them. So that has been one of the key reasons which has led to the downfall of India alliance. And as of now, according to my sort of opinion, I don't see India alliance putting a strong opposition to BJP. Maybe we have a coalition government. I mean, looking at a very
I think we've lost Indipal there again. Samir, could you walk us through again, what do you think of the India alliance versus BJP? And do you really seeing it winning over the BJP? And if not, why?
I'll be terribly honest, as someone who's like, even if you are going in to vote for Congress, which a lot of us, me, a lot of other people I know are, you should be very well aware that you're doing this to show some form of dissent, to show some form of opposition, but the win is not going to happen. It is just absolutely, it would be a miracle today if the India Alliance came over the NDA. I just do not see it happening, because even the India bloc, like Indipal was mentioning, Nitish Kumar fighting alone, Mamata Banerjee, AITC announcing that they'll fight alone, AAP, AAP announcing that they have solo fights in Punjab and Haryana. These aren't signs that augur really well. And like the political landscape of India has really changed, right? Where Congress was sort of a one-size-fits-all kind of party way back in the day, where they had different ideologies in different places. That's not going to work anymore, where like a party with such a unified front is like dominating you. You're going to have some form of clear-cut like strategy or a clear-cut ideology, which as much as you would expect under Congress, and there are a lot of reasons to vote for Congress, it's not something that you see with them right now. And like it did help that within their tenure, Congress did have its fair share of scams. The 2G scam didn't help at all, which was one of the reasons. There was the Satyam scam, the Commonwealth Games scam. All of these scams really, like, they hurt a party's reputation. When, as a common person, one of the biggest, like, even if you don't know the intricacies of politics, one of the things that just everyone over a dinner table conversation that you talk about with your parents is corruption. And when you have such large scams happening to you over a 10-year like 10-year span, it really hurts your party image. And I still think they're somewhat recovering from that. So to me, as much as I would hope for a congressman or a Congress competing, I just don't see it happening. Like, it would be a miracle if it ended up happening.
All right. So I think as of now, I think with some sort of certainty, we can say that we're looking at a third Narendra Modi term. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. It would really come as a shock if it didn't happen.
If he didn't win.
Yeah.
All right. What would you say are some of the clash points between the India Alliance and BJP, where you can say, all right, on these 2 points, they are on polar opposite sides? What are some of those points that definitely differentiates between them?
So I think recently itself, you would see like the electoral bonds has been a huge one. If you've been talking about how both parties have been interpreting, and the farmers' protests as well. Like, if you just read about how both sides interpreting what have happened, the farmers, like Congress is just undoubtedly, like, you have failed the farmers for like multiple reasons: GST, farmer suicide rates, farmer loan waivers, and BJP is like, oh no, but we've done XYZ, like we have the growth in the agrarian sector and whatnot. These are completely massive points of contention, and you could even see with the farmers' protest, it was just something that was aggravated. And the second is how they sort of just how they view the electoral bonds. Is one thing I think of recently is the claims that Congress was making as to like how they were using the BJP was using ED and other methods to increase the party funding is something that obviously, for very obvious reasons, BJP is going to be like, that is not something that has happened. We have not gotten finances that way, because it's not a good look. But so these are two things that immediately of status quo, what's happening right now, that come to mind, because these are very recent issues. The farmers' protests that happened again in 2024, the electoral bonds being announced. These are issues that are being contended right now, and these are, you could see how like dynamic Indian politics are in that two major issues that happened this year are being so strongly contended. So it is one of those. It's going to be a really heated election cycle, to say the least.
All right. Indipal, the question that I had asked Simir was, between the BJP and the India Alliance, what are some issues on on which they are starkly different. Their stances are completely polar opposite. And what sets them apart? What are some of those issues?
I think one of those issues is the line between secularism and communalization of issues. So one side claims to be secular, and one side also claims to be secular, but it takes a departure from being a pseudo secular in their own words.
They have a different
and
dictionary.
yeah, a different flavor of secularism maybe. So there, this varying definition of secularism, what defines as secular. So while one party claims that the other is, other practices a form of appeasement politics, whether that is an appeasement to the minority religion or to, as Samir said, the caste. And this side claims to be, a majority supported government, and of course has a Hindutva ideology behind it. So that is one very, starkly dividing issue. Second, I think, is the question of democracy. So one issue on which the opposition has repeatedly questioned the government, criticized the government, is the question of democracy, the degradation of democracy in India. So while one side claims that we are the mother of democracy and are the largest democratic nation, the other side also has reasons to say that this democracy is, as some indicators say, that it is an electoral autocracy or a democracy more on paper. So that, I think, is the second issue that divides the opposition and the ruling party.
Okay. I want to come to the scenario based on which this discussion even began, and that is the chances of Narendra Modi securing a two-thirds majority. A two-thirds majority would theoretically mean that he would have no opposition whatsoever. So let's say that Prime Minister Narendra Modi secures a two-third majority. What would the implications of that be? Would that be a boon or a bane? We'll have Samir first and then Indipal.
I think regardless of obviously we all have our biases when it comes to politics. Like somebody's going to fall in the center, somebody's going to fall on the right, somebody's going to fall on the left. A two-third majority can never be something that you can interpret as positive, because an opposition party is integral to any functioning democracy. Purely because if there is no dissent, if there is nobody calling you out on your decisions, there is no accountability. And if there's no we're already in a situation where we're losing a lot of accountability because of freedom of speech being curtailed to a certain extent, and this is not a good sign at all. If the opposition then virtually doesn't exist, then you have a government which, are we even a democracy at that point? Sure, on paper we are, but like we said, we can interpret it a million different ways. In that, if you have nobody calling you out on your decisions, if you have nobody actively showing, if nobody's actively able to show dissent, you are not going to actually be representative of what everyone thinks, just a certain majority, a certain section of society. And I don't think that's a good sign at all.
All right. Indipal, your thoughts?
Well, I would like to also, think a little bit about the other perspective. So, what Indian elections in the past 75 years have also taught is that these elections are full of surprises. So while, it is very likely that a two-thirds majority will be achieved and we are going to see a 400 par sarkar, but we should not assume this, because for any academician and for anyone who is looking from a scholarly perspective, keeping assumptions is a bad analysis. So we should also keep some room for surprises, because that is what we have been seeing in Indian elections. So in 2004 it was pretty much clear that BJP government and an NDA government would return, but we saw a result that surprised everybody. So that is also something that we should keep a room for and think about. But having said that, as Samir said, 400 par sarkar and a two-thirds majority government, although that means that the government has the mandate of the masses and the people who are being governed, that of course is the case, because that is what democracy is about. The one who gets the majority vote rules, and when the party gets the overwhelming majority vote, it is a landslide victory. It means the government has the mandate of the public. But the flip side again is that it blurs accountability. It makes a weak opposition. It also lets the government have more control over media and the public narrative and the opinion. So both sides have weight.
Okay. If they do secure a 2/3 majority, what do you think are some of the laws that they might try and push through very quickly? Like, a lot of people argue that because the BJP had such a majority, the farmers' laws were passed without any healthy debate at all, and that led to so much of mass protest and so much of public dissent. Do you think I want to talk in terms of the Uniform Civil Code, which is something that the BJP has been trying to push for so long? Do you think that a 2/3 majority would keep that door wide open now and make it a very real possibility? Indipal and then Simir.
Yeah. So I mean, the pattern has been pointing towards this. The pattern has been that the government has an agenda on the manifesto, and it fulfills the agenda. 370 was on the agenda, CAA was on the agenda, farm bills were on the agenda, and this government worked on those agenda. So now that the UCC is on the agenda, and I mean, that is one thing which is expected that this government, if it returns to power, will bring in the parliament. Second, I think is the One Nation, One Election bill. That is also something that will, I mean, it is likely to come in the coming years. So these are two things that I can think about right now. Will be possible, early actions once BJP returns to power.
Simir, what about you? Do you think that 2/3 majority would become like a portal to all sorts of controversial legislations?
I mean, you never really know, because on paper, theoretically, it should be, but like even with like when there is a really strong case of dissent, like there was with the first round of farmers' protest, which is why they repealed the laws, you have to contend with what everyone else is saying. Even in the case, UCC is not something that it's going to be a big decision, purely because there are a lot of critics for it. In that, while UCC theoretically, like a lot of things theoretically sound nice, like disregarding caste altogether, or like having a uniform civil code for everyone. But the thing is, it isn't an even playing field, right? There are different circumstances, and if you do implement a UCC, it is going to benefit certain people, because like the framework is going to be heavily biased towards certain people, or it's going to function in a way that inherently disadvantages certain people. So there will be mass pushback towards it, like there was with CAA, like there was with 370, like there was with the farmers' protest. So I don't know if like it will change so drastically that like that they will be able to push out everything to an extent that nobody can question it. But it will be a situation where they're definitely in a stronger position to do so than they were, like, let's say, when they were first elected in 2014. And it has gradually been building up to this point. And I think, like, if they win this election, they are at a point where it will be hard for anyone opposition to, like, stop them from passing these things. But I don't think it's impossible, is what I'm trying to get at.
Okay. So I think if the BJP secures 2/3 majority, the opposition will mainly not take place in the legislature. It's going to take place in the public. So the sphere of opposition will shift. But do you think opposition will still be there nevertheless? In different forms, maybe not in the legislature, but in the public. Simir, what are your thoughts?
I think opposition will always exist, like even with the Manipur violence, like everything that was happening there, it was something that people, like, they had a majority there. Everything was in favor of, like, it was really hard to stop what was happening, but there were still people calling it out. In that, I think in any form of government, even if you're in a autocracy, even if you're in a dictatorship, opposition always finds a way to exist. In that, there are always people who are willing to push back against status quo and the way things are. The strength of that opposition is something that definitely that will be
Right.
dwindling, or it won't be at the same level that it once was. It won't have the same metrics or the same tools that it once had. But an
Right.
opposition existing is inevitable, regardless of the form of government, regardless of where that government is. So I do think the opposition will still find ways to, people will still find ways to dissent, and the opposition will still exist.
Indipal, what do you feel?
I agree with Simir when he says that an opposition will continue to exist. A couple of reasons that I can think of for that are that, I mean, we are such a diverse country. No one party will always be able to accommodate and represent the viewpoints of all the diverse groups that we have. So, but what my speculation is that the kind in which the opposition exists will change. So instead of a national sort of an opposition, we may have a lot of small opposition. So we have seen that coming up. I mean, Punjab has its own small opposition, Delhi has its own small opposition, Bengal has its own small opposition. We have a lot of small parties down south. So I think that is something which we will see in the coming years. A lot of small opposition parties mushrooming in different states as as alternatives to the ruling party, which is the government of the majority, and that will stem from this need of minorities which may not find a voice in the ruling party. That I think is going to be a shift in the way opposition operates in this country.
Okay. Lastly, I want to discuss their claim of securing two-thirds majority itself. Previously, the BJP secured a majority, but they've set their target even higher now. And to achieve that target, they are going to need, South Indian states like Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Kerala, and they will need Jammu and Kashmir as well. So in these states which have historically been Congress strongholds, like for example, Karnataka is a Congress bastion. In the 2019 polls, the Congress won 26 out of 28 seats in the Lok Sabha in Karnataka. So, do you think this time the BJP has a better chance at grabbing these states, and will they be the game changer? Simir, you go first, and then Indipal.
Right. So again, like Indrapal earlier said, like it is really dynamic, and like right now the way it looks is, I think there's definitely, especially if we're talking specifically in terms of Karnataka, while they have lost the election and while Siddaramaiah is in power, I do think BJP has more of a stronghold now than it did when the earlier polls happened. Like the loss is indicative of a shift, but that doesn't mean that like once a party loses, it doesn't lose all influence or all stronghold over that certain state. So I definitely do think that there are still few seats for taking there. The other points of contention would be like Telangana, which recently just went to Congress, which was pretty, at least for somebody from Hyderabad, it was pretty unexpected. And then there's Tamil Nadu and Kerala, which they're going to like keep their expectations low in these places. But I do think that even with these places, while South India is still a huge point of contention, it's somewhere that they don't have as much of a stronghold or any stronghold at all now. Like especially with them losing Karnataka, it is still the fact that they're so strong in other regions that the two-thirds majority really looks possible, because even in the election that recently happened, barring Mizoram and barring Telangana, they had won all the states. So it does look like in the states where they have it, they really have it to an extent where you're like, yeah, that two-thirds majority is really, really possible.
Okay. Indipal, what do you feel? Do you think the BJP can, afford to keep expectations low in South India and still achieve their target?
A lot of, I mean, this depends a lot on how seats are delimited. So while a state like UP has a lot of states, I mean, I don't have the exact number in mind, but of course it is much larger than a number of small states combined. So the North Indian, the plains belt of India, it does have a large share in the number of seats that and the number of MPs that it sends to the parliament. So even if BJP does not manage to perform too well on some states in the south or maybe in the northeast or in states like Jammu and Kashmir, as you mentioned, it still will manage to get a good majority in the parliament. What I'm guessing will be on BJP's charts now will be to, I mean, to achieve a similar kind of success in state elections also. And we have seen that happening in states which have not been BJP strongholds traditionally, have also voted BJP into power, like Mizoram. I mean, Maharashtra has been always a stronghold of Shiv Sena, but we have seen tables turning in Maharashtra. States like, I mean, Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh, they'll also see a shift in government. So whether that happens by being a partner to some existing party like it did in Mizoram and in Maharashtra, or whether it is establishing a voter base of itself like it did in Manipur. But BJP will, of course, try to secure more strong foothold on on state, on state electorates also.
All right. Simar, could you give your concluding statement? How do you, first of all, do you think BJP can secure two-thirds majority? And since we're already talking in terms of Narendra Modi winning a third term, what do you think the next 5 years will look like for India? What do you see some of the major goals that you think will be achieved? And will we be in a better place or a place that is not so good, given that Modi might win a two-thirds majority?
I think it's an interesting question in that two-thirds majority right now, if like we've been saying the discussion, it looks very likely. But like Indrapal has said, India is a very dynamic place and very unexpected things have happened. Like in 2002, 2000, when Gujarat riots and the India Shining thing happened and they lost the majority, or like just a multitude of reasons. Like you can never predict something for sure in a country that's as dynamic as India. And as to whether I think it's going to be like the next 5 years, I think BJP is definitely in an interesting spot where I think if you had asked them early into the first tenure whether Modi would be the one in the third tenure, they would probably not. It's probably even their parties in a little bit of a pickle where it was they were not expecting, they were expecting some other new faces to come up, but there's nobody who's been as much of a unifying face as Modi has been. So that's something that they're also going to have to contend with if they want to continue this hegemony that they've built. But in terms of just on the grounds, it's like I hope that the next 5 years don't go down the route that it's currently going with, like freedom of speech being curtailed and the religious polarization continuing to happen and all the other issues that do exist. I hope things like even on a very like if we're talking just on a college level, things like the Safdar Hashmi Club being shut down. I hope things like that don't continue to happen, because if there's one thing you should have is the ability to voice your opinion, regardless of what that opinion is, whether you agree or disagree. So just hoping the next 5 years, people are still able to voice their opinion. People are still able to actively show their dissent without being shut down is one of the biggest hopes I have. But I don't think it's looking very encouraging, and I just hope the best for the next 5 years.
All right. Indrapal, your concluding statement.
I think Samir summed it up pretty well. I'll just say that it's going to be a big show, and all eyes are on the Election Commission and how India votes. So it is really important that the voter goes to voice his choice by voting. That's really crucial, because it's very important to look at the voter turnout also. So, and again, I mean, since we have the FPDP system, and there are a number of times when the percentage of votes does not synchronize with the number of seat share. So that is also something that has impact on the elections. But again, the way to counter is that is a voter turnout. So I think what all parties need to do right now is to mobilize their voters to go to the booths and vote. But having said that, it's going to be a big show. It's going to be an interesting next 2 months that are going to unfold in India, and the world is watching. All eyes are on us, and let's see how it goes.
Thank you so much, Indrapal and Samir. And on that note, I bring this discussion to a close. Thank you both so much for joining us. And this was a topic that that is in vogue, and it will have a lot of impact. The BJP could very well be successful in their goals, but I think overall the trajectory of the nation remains upward, and and of course we'll all be following the election really closely. Thank you both so much for joining, and I'm signing off until the next panel discussion. Thank you so much.